And we're seeing it play out in Russia right now with charges that the election there wasn't fair. We hear Hillary Clinton making these statements as she normally does before she lets loose the dogs of war on these countries. And China is another country that's in the gun sights right now.
And not that China or Russia are wonderful people. It's just that the banking cartels, the most nasty people ever on human history, have seized America. So it's not Russia, China good, America bad. It's banksters have hijacked America and are trying to use us to bully other countries, especially Russia. I know there's more of an incestuous relationship with the banksters and China. Looking at this new idea that the West funds rebels who attack the government. If the government fights back, it's called oppression. If they fire tear gas, it's called oppression. But here they billy club people. And then they invade the country. Now we see the UN wanting to, declare Syria a war zone. The puppet Arab League calling for attacks. Al-Qaeda being sent now out of Libya into Syria. All of this confirmed. How does the system square this? That we've got to give all our rights up and have TSA fondle our children and strip search old ladies because they might be Al-Qaeda, hiding in their diaper. But then Al-Qaeda is good, though, and fights the evil Assad in Syria.
Well, I mean, Al-Qaeda has always been the CIA. They created them. They nurtured them. They used them when they have to use them. I mean, this is quite apparent as I'm right now working on a book on the Obama, Soetoro, Dunham connection with the CIA. You look at past operations, even before the Mujahideen war against the Soviets, and you see this would play out over and over again. The U.S. supporting these various groups that in some cases come back and bite us big time. And it's quite clear, of course, that Obama and especially his grandparents grew up in this type of environment. His mother grew up in this type of environment, so he's perfectly happy with his own doctrine, whether it was given to him or not. He's happy with it. And as far as overthrowing governments by saying they're not democratic, right now, presently, Greece and Italy have unelected governments in charge of those countries, and we have Hillary criticizing Russia, Hillary criticizing China, other countries, when in fact Italy and Greece have unelected governments in charge. And just yesterday, Belgium, which has been without a government for over 500 days, appointed a government which is very unreflective of the situation. That country is being split in two between the Flemish and the French. And the government is not representative of the people, but it was another government installed by the bankers because Belgium's credit rating had been reduced. And today we find out that 15 members of the Eurozone are also facing similar credit downgrades if they don't get their house in order. Is this a prelude for installing unelected governments on those various countries? I believe this is what we're seeing now. The bankers are in charge. We've got the suppression of the demonstrations in this country with tear gas and as you mentioned, billy clubs and all kinds of. Now we have the Pentagon offering free military hardware to police departments around the country. Your warnings about the fascist takeover of this country, I'm afraid it's over. We have it. It's in place now. So what do we do about it?
Well, Wayne, let me get to that point, because on the nightly news last week, I covered a report that got into a very, very important issue, and that is the fact that in Time Magazine, in Newsweek, and the Financial Times of London, in all of these publications, Wayne, they just calmly come out now and say, you know what? Rule by governments and elected people's bad. We need a technocracy. We need experts. And The Economist actually said this is a good system. And it's good that Goldman Sachs has taken over Europe. And it's good that they're installing leaders now who are part of the Bilderberg Group and groups like that. And they are now just flaunting it. We see Newsweek saying the Constitution's the problem when getting rid of the Constitution has brought us to this point. So there's this now there's this hiding in plain view that I saw the opening salvo of 2 years ago with the article titled, "And Now for World Government," that was in the Financial Times of London, and their foreign editor said, yeah, it's authoritarian, yeah, it's secret, yeah, it's ruled by bankers, and it's undemocratic, and we're going to do it. And so now they're calling it the United States of Goldman Sachs in Europe. They're just publicly saying this, and Congress is saying, yeah, we'll use troops on the streets, and we'll secretly arrest you for no reason. And Obama's like, I'm going to veto that because I already have that power. I don't need Congress to tell me I can. I mean, it's even Twilight Zone-y for me, seeing it coming a million miles away, Wayne, because it's so out in the open and so obvious. And yes, they've said in Europe they're going to install unelected technocrats from the banker-installed bureaucracy. I mean, it's really happening, Wayne. I'm sorry to be...
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I ran a story this past week. We know that Obama was over in Asia. He announced he was they was going to open 5 new military bases in Australia. And I got tipped off by a well-placed person in the government of New Zealand who said that the U.S. military presence and intelligence presence in the Asia-Pacific region is unprecedented. He said he hasn't seen anything like it. The last time would have been World War II when we were fighting the Japanese in the Pacific. Now, what is this all building up to? This is a confrontation with China. And we know tomorrow, December 7th, what we all often remember, I think we're probably looking at down the road and in short order, some sort of military confrontation, maybe an attack blamed on the Chinese. It's going to put us in a full-scale war with China, with the Japanese, Koreans, Australians, Filipinos, and Vietnamese and others as our so-called allies. But this is, I think, what we're coming to. It may be in the South China Sea, where the Chinese and the U.S.-backed surrogates in the area are now fighting over oil and natural gas reserves in that area. And I think if we have read much about how Roosevelt knew about the attack on Pearl Harbor before it happened and let it happen to get us in the war, and I'm afraid we may, and I'm not saying this is, next week or next month, but I think down the road, especially if we see a second administration of Obama, but it doesn't matter. We could have one of the Republicans in there except for Ron Paul and a couple others maybe, but if we get a Gingrich or a Romney or somebody like that, forget about it. I think we're facing another Pacific war, and the warning came to me, as I say, from somebody very high-ranking in the New Zealand government.
And that's now confirmed, by the way. Iran has threatened to cut off Gulf oil exports if nuclear facilities are attacked. They have officially said, as of yesterday, they'll cut off Strait of Hormuz, 40% of the world's oil supplies. It will conservatively go to $7 a gallon here, or $200 a barrel in adjusted dollars is a conservative estimate from that, Wayne. And you just literally hit the nail on the head there, because what's happening here is China has said an attack on Iran in their major state-run media is an attack on them, just like the West, and I'm not defending the Imperial Japanese, it was one devil fighting another. The Flying Tigers, which were a corporate army, were sent in, as you know, for 2 years before the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and were attacking Japanese aircraft in southern China and surrounding areas. The Japanese continued to protest. Their oil supplies were being cut off in the region. And so, being a warrior class, led by a warrior class, they... Yamamoto thought they'd probably lose the war. He said, I fear we've awoken a sleeping giant. And his command said, we might want you to invade the West Coast. And he said there'd be a rifle behind every blade of grass. Are you insane? But the point is, he still followed his orders and attacked. And China, the globalists have played a double game with all the cheap slave goods to deindustrialize their competition here. But you're absolutely right, Wayne. They've moved into this. We're going to come back from break and talk about it with Wayne Madsen. This is so incredible that these proxy wars with Syria and all these other areas is meant to get around China and Russia. And again, it's not America doing this. It's the banking cartel using our muscle to do it. And I want to get his geopolitical view in this segment and the next. Then I'm going to get to the callers who've been holding. Okay, I'm going to get to you. We'll do the Corbett Report thing after that. and then get into this speech on the police state. It's all coming up. It's going to be a jam-packed third hour. Prisonplanet.tv. Stay with us.
In the event...
By the way, it's a sad issue, but I'll get to it later if I can. The London Guardian and others are reporting that the British Prime Minister, David Cameron, has come out and said that everyone in the national healthcare system will be opened up as a research patent, and that your blood, your DNA, your individual proteins are owned by the state. A federal judge ruled last Friday on the court cases of women's DNA for the cancer gene has been patented, so you can't get treatment for that. It cost, $100,000 instead of a fraction of that, because they won't let it ever go generic, because your genetics are owned by them. And how'd they get your genetics? Everybody for 40 years. It's now 40 years. It'll be 40 years and 2 months. For 40 years, and every industrialized country has had their blood taken for the secret database. And now David Cameron's public about it. They do what they want. They do atmospheric tests. They put stuff in our water. It's a scientific dictatorship. And while you're busy worried about football and all the rest of it, they're absolutely hammering the daylights out of us, okay? That's what I'm here to get you to do, to think. Wayne Madsen, you heard my question, my friend, and you're really the expert on these subjects. They are full steam ahead for war. Iran, the situation's getting serious. They've shot down the drone that could have even been weaponized. They're admitting now that the West is bombing them, blowing up bases. Iran says they're preparing for war. Things are really going into high gear. Where are we going?
Well, I believe we're already at a war situation with Iran, a low-level covert war. The shooting down of the U.S. drone is just part of this. The explosion at the missile base outside of Tehran was part of this. The explosion at the nuclear facility outside of Isfahan was part of this, and I'm sure we've got many other incidents like this happening that aren't being reported. Now, the Iranian government doesn't have a whole lot of interest in reporting it because it would tell their people that maybe the government's not able to defend the nation. And, of course, the U.S. and our side doesn't want to report on this because officially these are accidents that are taking place. This is how they're being reported from both sides. But every war game run by the U.S. Army War College, the Naval War College, where this scenario of going to war with Iran has been fed into the computers, it always has the same result. First, there's a regional war, and then it goes to global thermonuclear war. Remember the movie War Games from the early 80s, where this was always the ultimate result of these war games was global thermonuclear war. And that's exactly what we're talking about here, because as we were talking before, a cutoff by Iran of their oil exports hurts China, which relies heavily on those exports. Now, where will China go to try to compensate? They'll go to the South China Sea, which will put them in a potential military conflict with countries like Vietnam, the Philippines, and others in the area. And that could get us in a war, especially if we, put our Navy ships in there between the Chinese and these other countries. We're asking for the potential for some sort of an incident. We already know that even if the Chinese don't conduct an incident or arrange, bring one about, that we're always capable of doing one on our own and blaming them. Should I mention the Gulf of Tonkin and what happened there? We blamed North Vietnam for attacking 2 U.S. destroyers. They did not attack. This was totally made out of whole cloth.
Why do you think Gary Hart sent him a letter, 5 years ago, saying we'll stage terror attacks on ourselves?
Well, I think this is part of the scenario. We know about these false flag attacks and how they're used to promote these war situations, this global war on terror, this crazy thing that we lost all of our rights because of what happened on 9/11, another false flag attack. It's just that, but you go back through history, recent history anyway, of false flag attacks, and you find the CIA's fingerprints all over these operations.
Absolutely. Stay there. Back in 1 minute. Final segment with Wayne Madsen.
Perfectly happy with his own doctrine, whether it was given to him or not. He's happy with it. And as far as overthrowing governments by saying they're not democratic, right now, presently, Greece and Italy have unelected governments in charge of those countries. And we have Hillary criticizing Russia, Hillary criticizing China, other countries, when in fact Italy and Greece have unelected governments in charge. And just yesterday, Belgium, which has been without a government for groups. And we're seeing it play out in Russia right now with charges that the election there wasn't fair. We hear Hillary Clinton making these statements, as she normally does before she lets loose the dogs of war on these countries. And China is another country that's in the gun fights right now.
And not that China or Russia are wonderful people. It's just that the banking cartels, the most nasty people ever on human history, have seized America. So it's not Russia, China good, America bad. It's banksters have hijacked America. Al-Qaeda being sent now out of Libya into Syria. All of this confirmed. How does the system square this? That we've got to give all our rights up and have TSA fondle our children and strip search old ladies because they might be Al-Qaeda, hiding in their diaper. But then Al-Qaeda is good, though, and fights the evil Assad in Syria.
Well, I mean, Al-Qaeda's always been the CIA. They created them. They nurtured them. They used them when they have to use them. I mean, this is quite apparent as I'm right now working on a book on the Obama, Soetoro, Dunham connection with the CIA. You look at past operations, even before the Mujahideen war against the Soviets, and you see this play out over and over again. The U.S. supporting these various groups that in some cases come back and bite us big time. And it's quite clear, of course, that Obama and especially his grandparents grew up in this type of environment. His mother grew up in this type of environment. So he's
America and are trying to use us to bully other countries, especially Russia. I know there's more of an incestuous relationship with the banksters and China. Looking at this new idea that the West funds rebels who attack the government. If the government fights back, it's called oppression. If they fire tear gas, it's called oppression. But here they billy club people, and then they invade the country. Now we see the UN wanting to, declare Syria a war zone. The puppet Arab League calling for attacks.